D&D is a curious game in that it's not a competitive game. Now, there are certainly aspects of competitive game in it, and at times it can feel competitive. The orc attacks you and hits you and hurts you and is trying to defeat you, and there are many scenes where there are these clashes and different sides and forces are struggling to try to win, and the risk of failure and doom is always present. But at its core, it's really not a competitive game. It's not me versus you or that player versus that player. It's a shared storytelling experience is one way to put it. By the way, in this video, when I'm referring to D&D, really I'm just referring to tabletop role-playing games because this all holds true to the vast majority of all tabletop RPGs. Now, I say that this is curious or this is peculiar that it's not a competitive game, but in fact, I bet it's really not so weird. I bet humans have been taking part in these shared experiences where we enter into a mythic realm, a narrative world of journeys and adventures and struggles, and that sense of reaching for something beyond, reaching for the potential of something greater. I'm sure humans have been taking part in those kinds of experiences since time immemorial. So conflict is essential to telling a story. Now, you could tell a story without any conflict. I suppose it wouldn't be much of a story, though. You know, if the story is just guy gets up, eats breakfast, goes and sits on his sofa and watches TV and pigs out, or, you know, woman wakes up and, you know, does her hair like normal and has a completely average, forgettable day. There's not really much of a story happening there. Conflict is the fuel that drives a story. Conflict is what gives a story tension and traction and energy. That's what brings a story to life, that makes it interesting. What does our character or characters want? What is in their way? What are the obstacles? Who or what is not letting them get that or actively fighting against them? What are they trying? Why are their attempts not succeeding? Where are their struggles? Where are their failings, their vulnerabilities, their moments where they suffer and pain and have pain and go through trials? How do they overcome that? What resources and allies and mentors are there with them along the way? How do they get what they want in the end? What did it all mean? That is a story right there. That's what drives a story forward. So since conflict is so necessary, of course, something like D&D that is very conflict driven is going to feel competitive because competition by its nature has conflict. It also has cooperation of different kinds in it as well. But the conflict is that's the aspect of it that makes things feel competitive, even though it's not competitive. So whose side is a game master on then? Is the game master just on his own side, or on the side of the monsters and NPCs, on the side of just everything that's behind the GM screen? Is the game master on the side of the players? It's really all in the end about the players and their characters and just helping them to have fun. Is the GM just this kind of neutral arbiter that's on nobody's side? Is it some kind of mixture of on everybody's side simultaneously? So, of course, in tabletop role-playing games, things are very creative and very open-ended. So there are many different approaches that you can take to it. But I would argue that the greatest approach, or the best approach, is that the GM is on the side of whoever is acting. Whoever or whatever is acting in some kind of way, probably making a dice roll involved with it, but not necessarily. Sometimes you can attempt things without having to roll any dice. Whoever is actively doing something, the GM is on that person or that thing's side. Could be a character, could be a monster, Could be an NPC, could be an environmental force, could be some magical phenomena, whatever it is. If you are trying to find a way to get up that cliff and attack those orcs, the GM is on your side. Not that the GM is going to make it easy or remove challenge, but the GM will facilitate you, let you know, what do you see? What do you hear? What does the cliff look like? Does it look like it's easy or hard to scale? What are some other options that you might have? The GM is a window into this fantasy world, helping you to understand or at least observe what's going on and what the possibilities might be, and to also root for you, to share in your successes, to cheer along with your successes, and also lament or maybe chuckle along with your failings. Then once the character is up there fighting the orcs and it becomes an orc's turn and the orc is attacking that character, the DM is imagining, well, what would this orc do? What is the orc's attitude? And once the orc to succeed insofar as that's what serves the story, that's what gives the story that conflict, that fuel on the fire that brings things to life and gives things that sense of it mattering at all. So there's an ingredient that is important between the GM and the players, and that is trust. Trust we could think of as a foundation. Any good relationship, any healthy relationship uses trust, relies upon trust. Trust is this primary ingredient. There needs to be this trust, and you need to earn that trust. Everybody needs to earn that trust that we are all sharing in this interesting, immersive, great experience, grand experience together. And we're not here to, be vicious or vindictive or vitriolic or some other VI word that means some negative, toxic thing. We're not trying to do that. We're not here to tear each other down. Sure, we can joke around. We can be scoundrels and scallywags and all that. But ultimately, we are sharing in a wondrous experience together. So the players need to know that you, the GM, are being mindful of them. And you need to know that the players are being mindful of you. So what's weird is it's a little bit difficult for me to put this into words, even though I can feel this concept very easily. And when I'm running D&D, it's something that I've trained myself on, so it comes so naturally. But putting it into words is a little bit challenging. The GM is on the side of whoever is acting. The GM is helping the character or the creature to accomplish whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. Another way to state that is you are providing options or descriptions that help everyone play their characters. So of course, this is a little bit easier or faster when it comes to an NPC or a monster because it's just all in your head. When it comes to a player, you have to do a lot of communicating. There's a lot going on in D&D, and some things are more well-defined than others. Am I within range to target that goblin with a 60-foot spell? Well, are you using a battle map or a grid or some kind of VTT where you can measure things? Well, that's pretty straightforward. That's pretty objective and well-defined. If you're doing completely theater of the mind, the DM is going to have to make a judgment call or provide some kind of description to help the player get into the position that he's looking to get into. What if that same player wants to know if his character can climb up the side of a cliff? Okay, and then on the map, you just have these kind of squiggly lines that represent the rocky face of the cliff with the orcs on top. So here's where you have to start defining things. What does the rocky cliff face look like? Is it easy to climb? Is it hard to climb? Etc. Your imagination and your decisions as a GM have to complete these details. Some things even get pretty abstract. Does this orc look like he's gonna just fight to the death, or is he kind of shaky when it comes to morale? what's going on with this NPC at the moment. Like, can I get a read on this NPC's motivation? Is she lying to me? What does that amulet that she's wearing mean? Have I heard any news or rumors or past stories about her? So you need to communicate a lot with the players and try to be helpful with your communication. That is going to establish trust. That is also going to help them to accomplish, or at least to act. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Even if there's a great chance of failure, you should at least help them to be able to take action. I've seen a lot of GMs, and I have done this myself, especially in the past. They just automatically shoot down players' ideas whenever a player has some creative idea to potentially find a solution to a situation. The GM has this concept in his mind of certain ways in which the story could go, the adventure could go, the certain kinds of solutions that can work in these situations. And then the player comes up with this crazy, creative, monkey wrench solution, and the GM gets put on the spot and just no, or effectively says no. Now, sometimes it is true that there is certain information that a character just isn't going to know. So it does make sense in those situations to just say no. Your character just does not know. It doesn't matter how high you roll on a knowledge history check. You're just not going to know the password to this magic door. That's a puzzle or a problem that you're going to have to play the game and find a way to solve it. Or the characters have traveled to some far off land that they've never been to before, and they don't really have any background of studying this kind of lore. They're just not going to have a chance, even if they roll a natural 20, of just happening to know some bit of obscure, cryptic lore about this exotic, unknown location. A character who's never even touched a specialized tool before is just going to have no chance of constructing something with it. Maybe they could use the tool for a very basic function, but a druid who's never even touched smithing tools isn't going to be able to forge a suit of plate armor. He could try, but certainly he will fail. He could use the smithing hammer to, accomplish some kind of basic task, driving a nail or maybe trying to bend something in a different direction. Sure. But in the same way, the ranger, or maybe the fighter is a better example, who hasn't the slightest training in the arcane arts, she just is going to have no possible chance of deciphering these arcane runes or sigils. So barring all of those exceptions, all those kind of extreme examples, whenever there is a chance that the characters could succeed, even a slight possibility that the character could succeed, it's bad form to just shoot down players' creative ideas. Don't just shoot them down and make them feel bad for having a creative idea. That's lousy GMing. Now, maybe you got put on the spot. Maybe it kind of throws you for a loop. Maybe you even have to pause and think about it for a minute. That's fine. A good thing to do, a good solution in these situations, when a player comes up with a very creative solution that you hadn't even remotely considered before, but there is some chance that it could work. If you're being honest, a good thing to do is to say yes, but there is some kind of complication involved, or there's some kind of challenge involved. Let me think of an example here. Imagine that character got up onto that cliff, and there's a much larger battle taking place. It's not just the orcs. There's also a white dragon involved. And the player says, when the dragon flies by, I want to jump off the cliff and grab a hold of it and manipulate its wings in a way that it's going to fly down and crash into the web spell that Mysteria cast. So instead of just saying, no, or like, I don't know if that's quite in the rules that you can do that, just imagine it playing out in your head. Okay. I can imagine that happening in a world of heroic exploits and fantasy adventure. That certainly sounds like something that there is a possibility it could be accomplished. Easy? Certainly not. So since it's not just 100% assured that it would function, you just want to introduce a bit of challenge. Maybe it needs to be like a 2 step or 3-step process or something like that. I would say like, okay, first you need to grab a hold of the dragon at the right moment. All right. So you're going to spend your action now to ready this like leaping grab. Okay. When the dragon flies by, you use your reaction. That's you using your timing, and you jump at it. You're going to make an athletics check, and it will contest you with its athletics check. If you don't succeed, you are going to fall, and you're going to smack and take falling damage down on the ground below. If you do grab it, you've got a hold of it, but you're not just completely physically dominating the thing just so fast. You'll have to spend an action on your next turn to do another one of those athletics contests to see if you can manipulate its wings in such a way that it flies down and lands into Mysteria's web spell. And keep in mind, in the meantime, between those two different actions on your two different turns, the dragon's going to have its turn, and it's going to do what it thinks is the best thing and fight back against you, whether that's like biting and clawing at you or breathing fire right in your face, or it could just stop flying anytime it wanted. It could just stop flapping its wings. It doesn't have to keep flying. Is it worth it? That risk versus reward, that right there, that is adventure. That is heroic exploit. That is mythic storytelling. That's the good stuff, right? There's the conflict. There's that feeling of competition, even though behind the screen, okay, when it's the player's turn, I'm going to be providing options, potential solutions, suggestions, describing the world. And if he succeeds, cheer along with him, not try to like make him feel bad or make nasty comments because I wanted him to fail in the end. But when it's the dragon's turn, or when the dragon is rolling its contested athletics check, I'm going to be thinking like that dragon and trying to do its best to accomplish what it wants to do, whether that's roast the character that's grabbed onto its back, or find a way to fling the character to the ground with its own athletics contest, or what have you. It's this balance between no problem, it's easy, and no, that just can't work because I don't want it to work because I have this very narrow-minded view on what can happen in my game, where that's a sort of a control freak thing. Your job as a GM, well, you have many jobs as a GM, but one of your main jobs is to be mindful of the pacing and the tone and the feeling, just the kind of overall style and spirit might be a better way of putting that. The overall spirit of the game, right? You are like a caretaker and steward of the experience that you all are having together. And there are some different ways that you can judge that, if it's going well or going not well, or if a certain call you would make is going to be a good thing or a bad thing, right? Is it going to help make your game greater, or is it going to make your game worse? One metric that a lot of people mention, and I think this is it's a decent starting point to kind of get the ball rolling, is fun versus not fun, right? When you as the GM have to make a call on something or describe the way that something is turning out, or whether or not the player can succeed or attempt these different creative ideas, is would this be fun or would this be not fun? The player, wants to jump off that cliff and grab a hold of the dragon and try to make the dragon crash into a web spell and get tangled up. And obviously that's a pretty detrimental hindrance for the dragon to be in. Is that a fun thing if you allow the player to attempt that? Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. Just saying no flat out to that idea, that is not fun. The players want to take a battering ram into the dungeon and bash through a dungeon wall to access a different area of the dungeon that they otherwise might not have even gotten into, or maybe they wouldn't have gotten to it or much later in the dungeon. They really want to throw a whole monkey wrench in the dungeon situation when you thought, oh, they're going to go from point A to B to C to D, and D's the boss room. And they're like, no, we're going to take the battering ram, we're going to bash through and go from A to D. You allowing that, or at least allowing them to attempt that, is that fun? Yes, that's very fun. It's wacky, it's shenanigans, it could potentially get them killed, right? It might get them into a very bad situation where they've suddenly cracked open 2 different encounters simultaneously. But that's great. That's memorable. That's alive. That's something that you'll be able to talk about and share memories about in the future. Just saying like, oh, well, no, I mean, the battering ram, only that's really going to work against like doors and only certain kinds of doors that aren't too strong. That is not fun. So fun, I think, is a pretty good metric, but I think there are even better metrics. I would say there are deeper qualities to judge the game by than just fun. I would say meaningful versus not meaningful, or meaningful versus meaningless. Because you can have scenes that are somber scenes, serious scenes, even angering scenes or sorrowful scenes. They're not fun in the sense of like, everyone is giggling and laughing, or, like just being giggly and happy would be inappropriate at those moments. But they're very meaningful. They're meaningful in the sense of we see somebody striving. We see somebody enduring pain and difficulties and suffering. We see somebody grappling with existence or to make the right choice. Some really great moments from campaigns that I've run have nothing to do with dice rolls. They have everything to do with a character making a very difficult decision. It's a story-based moment, and there's so much built into it. It usually takes a long-form campaign to be able to get to these kinds of points. But it's so meaningful, and the character and even the player vicariously can be torn between which of these choices is the right choice. Neither of them are fully the right choice. They both have some trade-off and some painful sacrifice involved. That's very meaningful. And if, as a DM, you are not supporting the players and you're basically a kind of antagonist against the players themselves, or another problem would be not necessarily antagonizing them, but just making things kind of boring and mechanical and robotic, right? So it's like bloodless, passionless. That's a problem, and we can judge that problem by those things being less meaningful, right? You've done things that make the game less meaningful. The characters have less chances to strive, less chances to try to grapple with fate and destiny and, the manifesting of their potential. When someone plays a character in a role-playing game, it's this fantastic thing where you get to really try something out in this mythic, imaginative realm, something that's not necessarily you. There might be a bit of you in that character, but you get to play. That's why we call it playing a game. Literally, like children playing make-believe. You get to try different attitudes, different perspectives on life, different behaviors. You get to try many different things that you're not actually trying in your real life. It's sort of a testing ground, like a simulator, almost like a stress testing in an engineering sense. And the GM has this wonderful gift that you can give to the players of allowing them and giving them the space and facilitating them to role play those characters, to try out what is it like being somebody like this, or what is it like to do X, whatever X is. What is it like to study dark arts and get involved in some really shady, murky, demonic stuff? I think there's meaning in that. There's a lot of meaning. You can learn important things. You can learn what you should not do. You can learn that there are awful consequences to mucking around with the demons. And to contrast that, what is it like to be somebody who self-sacrifices, who strives to help others, to defend the innocent, to strike at the demon, to strike at the dragon who's terrorizing the kingdom, to be someone who is noble and is risking life and limb for the greater good. There's real danger in that, and it requires real courage. And what a great thing to be able to play a game where you can test that out, get a little glimpse, get a little taste of it. Another metric, which we can add in along with fun versus not fun and meaningful versus meaningless, is trust versus distrust. And by distrust, I'm talking about things that destroy trust and destroy relationships, the toxicity and the disrespect. And, when people come to this point where they just kind of continually undercut each other and doubt each other and regard each other as incompetent fools, it's this antagonistic thing. The decisions you can make as the GM, the support or facilitating that you provide as a GM in a given moment can either increase trust or it can decrease trust, right? It can introduce or enliven more trust in your game and the relationship you have with your friends, with the players, or it can eat away and poison and erode that trust and therefore erode the game. And when the players feel that they are undermined by the GM, and when the players feel disrespected and they feel they cannot trust the GM, then they don't care about the game. They don't care about your world. They don't care about the story. The game's going to fall apart. Your campaign is doomed to crumble. The rocket is not going to take off, or if it does take off, it's going to explode. It's certainly not going to reach that fantastic other planet that you're trying to get to. So I hope I was able to put this into words and to make sense out of something which is actually very simple and by this point intuitive for me, but putting it into words has turned out to be somewhat complicated. The GM is on the side of whoever is acting. The GM is there to be alongside, sharing in the experience of the players, the NPCs, and the monsters. It just depends upon who currently has the spotlight on them. When you make your decisions as a GM, measure them by, is this going to increase fun or decrease fun? Is this going to increase meaning or is it going to make things less meaningful? Is it going to increase trust between me and the players, or is it going to dispel the trust? Is it going to erode our trust? All right, so that's what I have for you. Thanks for watching. Down in the video description, you can find some cool links. I've got a free monthly newsletter. I've got a Patreon. I'm working on a new 5e book called Monstrous Heroes. You can get a copy of that on pre-order and show some support. Yeah, it's all down there. Check it out. You have my thanks. And I'll see you again in the next video sometime soon. As always, my friends, may your adventures be many.